My mother was a war widow, and Christmas was an amazing experience for me as a young child. She would go to church to the midnight service. Nothing was decorated. And when I would come down in the morning, it was an absolute wonderland of decorations, the smell of the fir tree and the candles and the cooking of food. I don't know how she managed to gather together all the bits and pieces that she did, because she didn't have very much money. But somehow we had the most incredible Christmas. The family would come, my grandparents would come, and aunts and uncles, and we would sit around the table. And the most amazing thing was my grandfather, who didn't drink, on Christmas Day after the meal, and he had gone, remember, he'd gone through the first war in the trenches, and the second war they had just survived. But Christmas Day to him was very special. And he would light up a mannequin cigar. He didn't smoke, but on Christmas Day after lunch, he would have a mannequin cigar and he would have a glass of port. And that was his celebration. And, but what I wanted to say was that my mother was an absolute hero to me, because she made things happen when we had nothing. So that is a wonderful memory that I have. Say thank you to her and remember all the things that she somehow managed to do for us as children, because really we didn't have much. And it was still, I was born in 1943 and I was a war baby. And we were still on rations through until just before the coronation in 1953, if you can believe it. So that's a bit of a story that I have, is the amazing and most exciting surprise of coming down the stairs and Christmas morning is here, it's happening, and my mother has made it happen.
I remember a children's service, and children love to dress up. And that year, the hymn, The Friendly Beast, Jesus our brother, kind and good, and then all the animals. And so that particular year, in addition to the manger scene, all the children were dressed as the donkey, the cow, the sheep, the doves, and they got to choose which ones they were going to be. And then they just had sort of masks and they put them on. And the children really reacted so positively. I've always remembered that service, because then, you know, they all got to stand around the manger, and the part that they had contributed to the birth story through the animal that they were representing, or the bird.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Karen.
Beautiful.
I have something, and this didn't happen at Robertson Wesley. It happened at that big church west of Erpenehende. And they, until this year, had this huge Christmas pageant, you might say, that took up their whole church. It's by Spirit West. Does anyone know the name?
Is that Mulet?
Yeah. It was a really moving experience. They had put so much work into it. But you walked through the town of Bethlehem. It took about 400 people to put it on. Phenomenal scenery, phenomenal costumes. You were just caught up totally in the spirit You know, you even saw the carts with the straw and so on. And after all this hoopla, you went out and you could only go out one way. And there was a stable with Mary and Joseph and the baby just sitting there quietly. And you walked by, and I thought, well, why aren't we noticing this more? I mean, this is the whole point. And then I realized that was the whole point. They were in a stable. Christ didn't come with hoopla. He came very quietly, and yet he had such incredible influence. It was just a very, very moving experience for me.
Thanks, Lorna.
This story happened at another church other than Robertson Wesley. But my friend decided that she was going to write a Christmas expansion story. And so she did narrating at the front, and I was in charge of costumes at the back and recruiting. And so I nabbed a couple of people dressed in black and said, you know, you'd make great sheep, and got them going, little black sheep, and they thought they were hilarious. Nabbed one of the men in the back row and said, I got a lot of ewes up front. I said, I need a ram or two. And he hopped up out of his chair and off he went, wearing sheep ears. And then I needed some wise men, because the tourists had gone by clicking all their cameras, and the businessmen had gone by, the choir who was dressed in suits they were given briefcases. And I said, I said to the people in the back row, I need wise men. And the three of them stood up and said, we'll do it. And I'm looking at these people thinking, you'll do it. Well, all right then. Got them dressed up, and away they went. At the end, I found out the two people who had come from England had never participated in a pageant in their entire lives. This was their first Christmas pageant, and they were 70. And I happened to have two women and a man as wise men. And I thought, it's okay. This works, because they were wise after all.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the best Christmas pageant I've ever seen.
Thanks, Sarah.
Well, I remember one Christmas at Robertson Wesley, and all of the candles were out. And our youngest son, Max, who at that time was in grade 5, so he must have been about 10. And he was part of the Cantillon choir. And he was part of the Cantillon choir, but he refused, due to his manliness, to sing in the high soprano that they wanted the boys to sing in at that time. So he didn't really sing, but nonetheless, he was enveloped by this beautiful choir and the beautiful building and the absolute beatific look on his face as he stood amongst the choristers in his little plaid vest and his little white shirt. And the look was so beatific, and I still have a copy of it upstairs. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful feeling. And the Cantillon group has a saying that says, it's not important that children make beautiful music. It's important that the music makes children beautiful.
One year I taught Sunday school, and one of the children, they were kindergarten age, he decided he wanted, this is when they all went up. They all dressed up, and then they all go to the manger together. And he decided he wanted to be a bear. And I just thought, okay. And he wore a fur coat and went to visit the manger dressed as a bear. And I thought that was really cool.
One Christmas, I was in Belize scuba diving with a group of friends, and all the men in our group went across the street to the pub, and they were singing all these, I think, British pub songs. And all the women in our group chose to go to this church that was right on the beach. And it was big and beautiful, with stone Gothic, and they were ringing the bells and ringing the bells and ringing the bells to get the people to come into church. And so we took our place at the pew, and the floor was sand. And as it was Catholic, and as the altar boy, I don't know what you call it, was leading the priest up the aisle with the cross, there were wild dogs everywhere, like street dogs. And all of a sudden, the priest, there was this dog just sort of laying in the aisle, and the priest, all of a sudden, his foot shot out from under his, what do you call it? Right, they just kicked the dog to the side. So the priest didn't have any shoes on, I noticed, and he continued on, and to the altar. Meanwhile, the dog was in the procession up to the altar, and he just curled up on the floor of the altar. Meanwhile, bells are still ringing and still ringing and still ringing. There's all the men in the pub, they're singing these songs, and you could hear them. You could hear, oh, da, da, da. And eventually, later we found out that one of the underling priests, not the head priest, he had gone over to the pub. He said, fellas, it's Christmas Eve. Could you please just hold down the bar songs for a few minutes? And that's my Christmas
45 years
story.
ago, Quinn and Anita started the early children's service at Robertson Wesley, and it was the Christmas story. And I come home from work at 4:30 in a panic to go to work, and we get a phone call. We don't have a manger. And I'm sitting there thinking, where do I get a manger in half an hour? I didn't have, so went into the garage, found a pallet, and built a manger in about 10 minutes, and brought it out. And you guys are still using that manger today. It's 45 years old. It was made in 10 minutes out of a wood pallet.
Oh my God, that's awesome. My favorite memory of a Christmas Eve service is the first Christmas Eve service our Australian son-in-law came to. And as the service is ending and the carillon is playing and we walk out the door and the snow is slowly drifting down, and he says to me, it's just like in a movie. Aww.
One of my favorite Christmas stories has always been, well, it's not our story to tell, but it's from Stuart McLean's Vinyl Cafe. Now, they come on every year, and it's the story of Dave and his family. There's all these antics that they do, and the bridge story, there's lots that, if you watch the Vinyl Cafe or listen, you'll know. And there's a lot that CBC airs. There's one about the Valkyrie, the fighter plane, the lost story of Christmas. There's so many, and I just remember since I was a little kid, we'd always sit in the dining room, sit at the table or on the floor, and just listen through our stereo to these songs and stories. And it's just been magical, just awesome.
I must have been in maybe junior high, so I think I would have been in youth group, and Peggy was the minister at the time, and she was like, okay, we're gonna, like, the older kids will sing Away in a Manger. And so we started to sing, and she's like, okay, maybe the kids, they'll hum Away in a Manger. And then like, my humming is fine, but not particularly great. And so by the end of it, she's like, okay, just sit there and the piano will play Away in a Manger. And that's like, she was trying to be so nice for my like horrific singing abilities. And so in the end, we just like sat and the piano played, because me and my siblings were not, and some of the other youth at the time were not able to sing or carry a tune well enough to sing Away in a Manger in the nativity. So yeah, I always think of that. It's like, yep, that was like a key moment in me remembering that I have like no ability to sing anything. So,
Well, we're glad you have lots of other abilities, Story.
right? And at least I'm very aware of like my strengths and my weaknesses, and no one will ever have to listen to me sing on a Sunday morning.
People that wanted to be more active in the church belonged to the flower group, and Christmas was a great time for the flower group. They had we met the 1st of December and created all the decorations in the church, or put them up and put all the handmade decorations on the Christmas tree. And there were so many members that I remember that were associated with the flower group. In fact, years ago, Marion Francis was sort of, people thought she was the flower group. Marion Francis and Kay Law, people that are no longer with us, and Elva Gallagher. And it was a wonderful group of women. And the last couple of years, we had a couple of men in it too. But and we always, when we put up the Christmas decorations, that wasn't the only function, but it was when we met, we would always go out for lunch after. And they, of course, they did the Easter decorations, and sold lilies and hydrangeas, and decorated the church with those. So anyway, that was my memory of the flower group. And I know that I've belonged to Robertson Wesley ever since about 75, I think, because my husband passed away then, and Gordon Oakes did his funeral.
I'm going to do several sort of memories, different time periods, so bear with me. My earliest remembrance of Christmas was when I was a young child. I can't remember how young I was. It was at one of those Sunday school Christmas pageant concert things. And each child was supposed to go across the stage holding up a letter, maybe from Christmas. I don't remember that. And then we were supposed to say, C is for Christ child. And then there would be a little phrase that you would have to add to that. And I walked on and I said, what example, C is for, and then I totally froze. I could not remember what it was. And all I said was, I forget. I guess they were pretty kind to me. But that was my earliest memory. Later on, I was the eldest child in the family. So I don't have many memories of early Christmases apart from that one, until we became sort of a family of 4. And I was the eldest child at about 9 or 10. Then we did the big family things, and the rule of law on Christmas morning was that we could not go down to the area where the Christmas tree and the stockings were until my father had been downstairs and had lit the Christmas tree and made it okay for us to go there. And of course, young children could not really wait, and they tried to get their parents out of bed. And actually, a couple of mornings, I was probably 10, 11, I would go downstairs myself in the early morning. It was dark in this big, large room in our old house. And I would just open the door and just take in the silence and the smell of the tree, and it was magic. So that is early memories of my childhood Christmas. Later on, I became the teenager that my younger siblings tried to get out of bed in the morning. As far as Robertson Wesley, my Christmases have all been tied up with the choir. And in early days when Bruce Recrofts was there, we would have large parties before Christmas Eve service, and with eggnog that was spiked, and it was a fun time. And then we would all leave there and come to church to practice, and then the beautiful Christmas Eve service that followed. And those Christmases, although we did our parties later under lessons and carols, those early Christmas Eves were pretty special.